The chapel fell silent as the organ played her in. 100 heads turned, standing in reverence as Claire walked down the aisle, veil soft as smoke, lips pressed into a perfect smile. But then, bang, the church doors flew open. A teenage boy stood in the light, chest heaving, eyes wide and locked on the groom. "Dad," he said, voice shaking, "you cannot marry her. I know what she did." The bride froze. The groom blinked. The boy opened his hand. Inside was the truth. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. Marcus was not the kind of kid who spoke just to be heard. At 14, he had learned the value of silence. He had learned how to observe, how to sit in the background, unnoticed, collecting details like puzzle pieces that nobody else bothered to fit together. He had his father's eyes, sharp, tired, always scanning the room. His father, Anthony, was a nurse, quiet, kind, and a little worn down by life. After the divorce, it had just been the two of them. Late dinners at the kitchen table. Football games they never finished. Nights where they fell asleep with the TV still on. There was comfort in the routine, even if it was a little lonely. Then Claire came along. She arrived like a sunrise, warm, glowing, beautiful in a way that made people forget how cold the night had just been. She met Anthony at the hospital after a minor car accident. Marcus remembered the first time she came over. Her laugh filled their small apartment like music. She brought candles, cleaned dishes without asking, called Marcus sweetheart, even though they had just met. For a while, Marcus wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe she really loved his dad, that she liked him too, that maybe their broken little world could be whole again. But the truth had corners, and Marcus kept running into them. Claire was different when Anthony was not around. Her smile sharpened, her voice tightened. Sometimes she would speak through clenched teeth, whispering things that made Marcus feel small. "You really think your dad needs your attitude right now?" she once said after Marcus asked her to stop touching his things. "He is happier without your drama." Anthony never heard that side of her. To him, Claire was salvation. She was a woman who brought him out of the fog. She encouraged him to smile more, push him to take better jobs, even help him buy a new car. She painted their future in soft colors. Weekend getaways, maybe a baby, eventually a house far from the city. But Marcus noticed how people slowly stopped visiting. Family gatherings became awkward. Old friends of Anthony's stopped calling. Claire always had a reason. "Your sister is too negative. That friend is jealous. You deserve peace." Peace started to look a lot like isolation. And Marcus, stuck in the middle, began to wonder if he was the only one still seeing clearly. One afternoon, Claire left her car keys on the counter. She had gone out for a run, and Marcus, curious, cautious, walked to her car and opened the glove compartment. Inside, buried beneath tissues and gum wrappers, was a small black notebook. It was filled with phone numbers and addresses. Most of them meant nothing. But one name he remembered from a missing persons alert that had popped up on his dad's Facebook feed. That night, he said nothing. He tucked the name into his mind, like a seed he was not sure would grow. But it did. In the days that followed, Marcus started paying attention to everything. Where Claire went, who she texted, what she said when she thought no one was listening. He noticed a locked drawer in her bedroom, the whispery phone calls on the balcony, the bruises on her hand she never explained. He tried telling his dad. Twice. The first time, Anthony just smiled and said, "She is trying, son. Just give her time." The second time, Anthony got angry. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Why can you not let me be happy?" Marcus did not try a third time. Instead, he listened, he watched, he waited. And then, 1 week before the wedding, everything changed. Claire had gone out again, said she was running errands. Marcus watched her drive away, then made a decision he could not take back. He walked into her bedroom, reached behind her dresser, and pulled out the box he had seen her hide weeks earlier. It was locked, but Marcus had tools. A screwdriver, a bent safety pin, a little desperation. Click. Inside was everything. Passports, birth certificates, old IDs with different names. Legal documents with erased stamps. Photos of Claire in different clothes, different cities, beside different men. One photo made his heart stop. Claire, smiling, beside a man who, according to the newspaper folded beneath it, had not been seen since 2019. Marcus took one thing from the box. Just one. Then he closed it, slipped it back into hiding, and stood still in the middle of her room. The silence felt like it was watching him. The next morning, Marcus woke before the sun. He had hidden the photo inside an old notebook under his bed, taped between the pages, just in case. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again, Claire grinning beside that man, the man whose face now lived in newspaper clippings and online memorials, the man no one had seen in nearly 6 years. Marcus knew what he had to do. He waited until Anthony left for work. Then he took his father's work laptop, the only one with admin access, and typed her name into a search engine. At first, nothing, but then he remembered the other name on the passport. He typed it in. This time, the screen filled with results. A news article from a town 4 hours away. An image of Claire, only she was not Claire then. She was Melissa Carter. She had been questioned after her former employer was investigated for embezzlement and forgery. Charges were dropped. The article called it insufficient evidence. But in the photo, her eyes looked exactly the same. Dead center, calm in chaos. Marcus scrolled faster. Court records, job histories, gaps in her past that made no sense. She had been Melissa, then Vanessa, now Claire, each name tucked inside a different state, a different man's life. It felt like staring into a cracked mirror. Later that afternoon, Claire left for what she called final dress fittings. Marcus followed her, quietly, on his bike, staying far enough to not be noticed. She drove to a quiet strip mall just off the interstate, parked in the far back. Marcus crouched beside a hedge and waited. 10 minutes later, a man got into her car. They sat there talking. He could not hear it clearly, but he saw her hand pass him something, an envelope. And then, as they argued, Claire said a name Marcus recognized. It was a woman from the black notebook, the same one linked to the missing persons case. He froze. Claire shouted at the man, then shoved the envelope back into her purse. She drove off in a cloud of dust. Marcus took out his phone and recorded the last seconds, just enough to capture her face through the window. That night, he told his dad again. He did not mention the box, or the photos, or the man in the car. He just said, "She is not who she says she is." Anthony was tired, overworked, stretched between night shifts and wedding plans. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him, then whispered, "You have got to stop. This is not okay. Claire has been nothing but good to us. Why can you not see that?" Marcus felt his chest twist. He stood there, still as stone, while his father walked away. That night, he made a plan. If Anthony would not listen, then Marcus would find someone who would. The next morning, he returned to the church, the place where the wedding would happen. The chapel was unlocked for cleaning. He walked the aisle, sat where the guests would sit. He imagined the moment, the music, the veil, the vows, and then he imagined the photo in his pocket. That was when he knew he would stop it himself. He rode to the police station that afternoon, walked up to the front desk, heart pounding. He pulled out the photo, his notebook, even his phone with the video. The officer glanced at them, then asked, "Are you this woman's son?" Marcus shook his head. "She is marrying my dad. Tomorrow." The officer's eyes changed, subtle and cool. "You are a minor. Your father would need to come in. Without that, unless someone is in immediate danger, we cannot process this." Marcus swallowed hard. "But someone is in danger." The officer leaned back in her chair. "I am sorry, kid. I need more than a hunch." Marcus left, crushed. The doors closed behind him like the last line in a book. But that night, as Claire laughed in the kitchen, clinking glasses with his dad, he stared at her from across the room. She winked at him, slow and smug. He did not blink, because he knew what she had done. And tomorrow, the world would know too. The morning of the wedding was quiet. Too quiet. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, shoes untied, heart thudding like a drum in his ears. Sunlight crept in through the blinds, slicing across the notebook where the photo still lay hidden. He had not slept. Not really. He had played the moment over and over in his head. The aisle, the music, his dad's face when he saw the truth. He imagined Claire turning cold, imagined the guests gasping, imagined a room filling with silence so thick it could shatter. But it was all imagination, and time was running out. Anthony had not said a word to him since last night. He walked past Marcus in the hallway, like he was invisible. Claire was already at the venue. Makeup, hair, final touches. The day she had spent a year planning was finally here, and Marcus was still just a boy with a warning no one would hear. He grabbed his bag, tucked the photo into his jacket pocket, and headed for the front door. But he did not go to the church. Not yet. First, he rode to the county clerk's office. His bike tires skimmed over wet sidewalks, his backpack bouncing with every bump. The government building sat cold and square at the end of the block. He chained his bike to a stop sign and walked in. It smelled like old paper and waiting. Inside, he pulled the names from his notebook. Claire's former aliases, Melissa, Vanessa, and the last name, Rachel, taken from the signature on one of her fake IDs. He asked for records under all of them. The woman behind the desk blinked at him. "You're doing research?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "For school." After a pause, she handed him a stack of files, printed pages still warm from the copier. He took them to a corner table and flipped through them one by one. There it was. Rachel Quinn, born in Alabama. Changed her name in 2016. No legal name change request. Suspicious activity flagged by a private bank. Closed account. Then he found a police file. Public record, though barely legible. A man named Thomas Jenkins. Disappeared 3 weeks after Rachel, Claire, had moved in with him. No body ever found. His hands were shaking now. The same face. The same woman. Her trail was paved with vanishing men and paper-thin names. He folded the documents, stuffed them into his bag, and ran. The wedding had started. He was out of time. He pedaled toward the church as fast as his legs could carry him, chest burning, legs numb. He turned onto the final block just as the music inside began. He had to get there before the vows. Inside the chapel, everything was perfect. White roses curled over every seat. The guests stood. Anthony stood at the altar, hands folded, tie freshly pressed. He looked nervous, but happy, blissfully unaware that he stood one step from a cliff. Claire stood behind the closed doors, veil down, bouquet trembling ever so slightly in her hand. Her lipstick was blood red. Her eyes were calm. But she kept glancing at her phone, at the man in the corner who had delivered the envelope the day before. He was sitting in the third row, pretending to smile. Then, bang, the front doors burst open. Heads turned. Marcus stood in the light, breathless, hair wild, one hand clenched at his chest. People gasped. Claire's face dropped like a mask slipping off. And in that moment, time split in two. The life before this moment, and the one after it. Marcus stepped forward. "I am sorry," he said, voice shaking, "but this cannot happen." Someone in the back muttered something. A phone camera blinked to life. Claire took a step back. Anthony's face twisted, confusion, anger, then worry. "What is going on?" he asked. Marcus pulled the photo from his pocket. "This is not Claire," he said. Gasps. "She has been someone else. More than once. I found files. Fake names. Dead people connected to her. I saw her give money to a man who knows what she did. I tried to tell you. I went to the police. But no one listened." He looked straight at his father. "So I came here. I had to." There was a moment of unbearable stillness. Then Claire's voice sliced through the air like glass. "He is lying." She laughed, forced and high-pitched. "He has hated me since the day we met. I do not know what he found or faked, but he is just a scared little boy trying to ruin our day." Her voice cracked at the word boy. But something had changed. The guests were no longer sure. A murmur passed through the church. Someone stood up. "Wait!" said a woman near the front. "I know her. That is Rachel. She used to work with me years ago. She left after they caught her stealing." Claire froze. Her face fell completely still, and Marcus knew she had just lost control. For a few seconds, no one moved. The chapel hung in limbo, as if even gravity had paused to see what would happen next. Claire's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes flicked across the crowd, searching for an escape, for defense, for someone who might still believe her. But there were too many eyes now, too many truths unraveling all at once. The woman who had recognized her stepped forward, slowly. "I know what I saw," she said again. She went by Rachel Quinn. She worked front desk at Mercer Dental in Tallahassee. Got caught changing numbers on the books. We all saw it. Claire's voice broke the silence. "You are confused. I do not even know you." But her voice was hollow now. Her words floated, ungrounded. Someone else stood up, a man from the groom's side. I remember now. She told me she was from Oregon, but this lady just said Tallahassee. "Which one is it, Claire?" Marcus stepped forward again. "None of them. She has been in Alabama, Georgia, Florida, under 3 different names. And each time, someone around her disappeared." Anthony still stood at the altar, unmoving. His hands were open at his sides, as if waiting for something to land in them. Claire turned to him, her voice suddenly sweet. "Gentle. Baby, please. Look at me. You know me. You know my heart. This boy, he is sick. He is obsessed with tearing us apart. I told you he hated me." Anthony blinked. "I saw the photo," he said slowly. "The one with that man. The man they say is missing." Claire's smile twitched. Marcus reached into his jacket again, pulled out the folder from the clerk's office. "I went and got records, police reports, ID matches, all her names. I found a document with her signature on a forged property transfer. She took a man's home. He disappeared a month later." Claire's face turned sharp. "You little rat," she hissed. "You went through my things." Her voice was no longer gentle. She was not pretending now. And everyone heard it. A hush fell again. The tension had thickened into something real, dangerous. Anthony took one slow step back from her, then another. Claire looked around. Her breath quickened. She turned toward the side aisle, the closest exit. Marcus moved faster than he ever had in his life. He ran down the carpet, arms pumping, and flung himself toward the side door just as she lunged for it. Slam. He shoved it shut and stood in front of it, chest heaving, hands shaking. "No," he said. "You are not running this time." Claire lunged at him. In a flash, Anthony was there, between them, pulling Marcus back, stepping in front of the son. "Get away from him," he said, voice low and cold. Claire stepped back, startled. She had never seen Anthony look like that before. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed. 911, what's your emergency? "There is a woman here. She has been living under a false identity. She is wanted in connection with missing persons and fraud cases. She is trying to flee the scene of a wedding right now." Claire's hands curled into fists. She looked around one last time, calculating, but there was nowhere left to run. The guests began to back away. Chairs scraped. Someone whispered she could be dangerous. Another held up their phone, recording every second. Marcus stood frozen behind his father, heart pounding in his ears. He watched the woman who had nearly become his stepmother, this stranger who had filled their home, their fridge, their future, stand perfectly still at the altar, now stripped of every mask she had ever worn. Her silence was louder than any scream. 5 minutes later, red and blue lights blinked through the stained glass windows. Officers entered with quiet purpose. Anthony pointed. "That's her." Claire tried one last time. "You do not understand. This is all a setup." But they were already reading her rights. As they cuffed her hands, she turned back to Marcus, not angry, smiling, like she knew something no one else did. Then she was gone, dragged through the same door she had planned to walk through as a bride. The guests slowly began to file out, stunned, murmuring. But Anthony and Marcus stayed behind, alone near the altar. Neither said a word. until Anthony sat down beside him, his voice barely above a whisper. Why did I not see it? Marcus looked up at him. Because you wanted to be happy, he said, and I wanted you to be safe. And for the first time in a long time, Anthony reached out and pulled his son into his arms. The church emptied, but Marcus and Anthony stayed behind. The silence now was not tense. It was heavy, like the end of a storm that leaves behind soaked earth and broken branches. Sunlight streamed into the tall windows, slicing the altar in long golden lines. Anthony sat in the front pew, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. Marcus stood a few feet away, clutching the folder still tucked under his arm. His heart had stopped racing, but the tremble in his fingers had not. It felt like his body knew what his brain could not say yet. It was over. She was gone, but the pieces were still falling. Anthony looked up at his son. You saved me, he said. Marcus blinked. What? You saved me, Anthony said again, his voice barely holding. From a woman I was going to give my life to. From something I did not want to see. He looked down, swallowed hard. I kept thinking I was being given a second chance, that I deserved to be happy again. I thought you just wanted to ruin it. I thought you were still just a scared little boy holding on to what was left of your mom. Marcus lowered his eyes. I was scared, he admitted, but not of her. I was scared you were disappearing. Anthony nodded slowly. Then he stood up. Come on, he said softly. Let us go finish this. They drove to the police station in silence. Claire or Rachel or Melissa or whoever she truly was sat behind a glass wall in handcuffs, flanked by 2 officers. Her hair was still perfect. Her makeup barely smudged, but she looked different now, like a painting someone had turned upside down. Detectives led Marcus and Anthony into a private room. They asked questions. Marcus gave everything he had. The photo, the IDs, the notebook. Anthony added what he could, including bank account records Claire had asked him to sign for, documents she had drawn up for tax reasons, and a joint property form he had never submitted but had been ready to. She would have taken everything, one officer said, and that is if she let you live long enough to watch. Another detective entered with files from neighboring states. It was worse than they thought. Claire had been married before, twice. Both men had died under uncertain conditions. No convictions, no charges. Just carefully filed insurance claims and cold case notes buried in courthouse archives. She used identities like tools, the officer said. Found vulnerable men, cleaned them out, disappeared. We believe she was connected to at least 3 fraud rings. Possibly more. Anthony sat back in his chair, hollow-eyed. She was living in my house, around my son, in my bed. He looked sick, but Marcus reached across the table and placed a hand on his father's. You see her now, he whispered. Anthony looked at him, and for the first time in years, really saw him. You are not a boy anymore, he said. Marcus did not answer. He just nodded once, quietly. As they stood to leave, the detective gave them a last warning. She will try to twist this. She is good at it. If lawyers get involved, you may be called in again. Stay close. And be careful who you trust next. They stepped outside into the fading afternoon light. The sun was setting, low and gold and soft. People passed them on the street, smiling, laughing, carrying on with their lives like nothing had changed. But for Marcus and Anthony, everything had. They walked in silence for a few blocks, neither of them in a hurry to return home. Eventually, Anthony spoke. She fooled me. She fooled a lot of people, Marcus said. But I was supposed to protect you, and I let her into our lives. Marcus stopped walking. You also let me stop her. Anthony stared at him, and then, for the first time in what felt like years, he smiled. Not the tired kind, not the polite kind, the real kind, the kind that felt like the beginning of something new. They kept walking, side by side, no more secrets between them. And though their home would be quieter now, it would also be safer. 2 weeks had passed. The church was empty now, the altar stripped bare, flowers thrown out, programs swept up, and the guest book untouched on a forgotten table. What was supposed to be the beginning of a new life had become the end of a dangerous lie. But inside Anthony and Marcus's small apartment, something unfamiliar had started growing. Peace. It came quietly, like sunlight through thick curtains. Anthony had canceled all joint accounts, closed credit cards Claire had opened, and contacted every agency she had touched. Most of his savings were still intact, but it was not about money anymore. It was about trust, about the kind of wound that does not bleed, but still aches when you breathe too deep. Marcus had stopped waiting for apologies and started writing. He filled notebook pages with what had happened. From the first day Claire smiled at him, to the photo he found, to the moment his dad finally believed him, not because he wanted revenge, but because he needed to remember what it had cost to be ignored and what it meant to finally be heard. Anthony saw him writing one night at the kitchen table. "You going to publish that one day?" he asked, folding laundry with slow, careful hands. Marcus shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe I will just keep it, to remind me what a monster looks like when they smile." Anthony nodded, but his voice was gentler than it had been in weeks. "You saved me," he said again. He kept saying that lately, not just when he was tired or guilt-ridden, but in the quiet moments, when they were watching a movie, when Marcus got up to help with groceries, when he caught himself about to say "we," and realized it was just the two of them again. They started therapy the following Monday. It was awkward at first. Neither of them was great with words, but their therapist helped them speak in fragments that turned into sentences. Sentences that turned into truths, like how Anthony had been lonely, how Marcus had felt invisible, how silence had nearly broken both of them. They were still healing, but this time they were doing it together. People around the neighborhood started to take notice. The story hit local news. Not the full details, just enough. Teen saves father from fraudulent fiancée. Marcus hated the cameras, but Anthony kept one article clipped and tucked into the corner of a picture frame. A photo of them at the lake from years ago, before Claire, before all of it. Anthony started reaching out to people again. His sister, old friends. He apologized to the ones Claire had pushed away. Some were hurt. Others were just glad to hear his voice again. They came over for dinner, brought pie, laughed at old jokes. And with every warm conversation, the apartment felt less haunted. One night, Anthony knocked on Marcus's bedroom door. He was holding 2 backpacks. "Thinking of going up north next weekend," he said. "There's that old campsite we used to love. You know, back before all the..." He paused, then smiled softly. "Before..." Marcus looked at the bag, then back at his dad, and for the first time since the day everything shattered, he smiled without fear. "I would like that," he said. They sat together for a while that night. No TV, no phones, just a boy and his father, side by side in the quiet they had earned. And somewhere deep in the walls of their home, the tension uncoiled. It was not happiness, not yet, but it was a beginning, and that was enough. Some stories do not end with fireworks. They end with something quieter. A door that stays closed, a father who listens, a boy who finally breathes. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth before anyone is ready to hear it. Marcus was only 14. No badge, no title, no one telling him he was right. Just a gut feeling, a flicker of something wrong hiding behind a smile, and the unbearable silence of not being believed. But he spoke anyway, and in doing so, he saved not only his father's life, but his soul. See, love can make us blind, desperate, willing to trade our instincts for the illusion of peace. Anthony was not a fool. He was just lonely, tired, trying to patch the hole left by a woman who left too soon. And that is what predators count on. The ones who look kind, sound soft, move like they belong. But monsters do not always come with claws. Sometimes they come with flowers, with good credit, with promises that sound exactly like the ones we have waited our whole lives to hear. This story is not about a wedding that never happened. It is about what happened when a child became the only one brave enough to say, "This does not feel right." And when a father finally chose to believe him. There are moments in life where truth costs everything. Relationships, reputations, love, but silence costs more. So if you're watching this, and there is something in your life that feels wrong, if your gut is whispering what your heart is afraid to hear, listen, ask questions, trust your eyes. Even if it means standing in front of 100 people to speak the one thing no one wants to say. Marcus did not save his father because he was smarter than anyone else. He saved him because he never stopped paying attention. And when the time came, he did not run. He did not hide. He stood at the door and told the truth.